Right, welcome to Rugby League Radio. It's 31st of July, 2021. It's been a crazy couple of weeks. There's news all flying all over the place. So we're going to try and make some head of it all tonight with some great guests. We've got Richard De La Riviere. I'm never sure how to pronounce that name. Was that any good? Was that all right?
Very good.
Okay. We've got Mike Haig, another one who's, changes his name for me. Perfect. Andrew Foster.
Yeah. That's an easy one.
That's easy. Then Paul Abroad. Paul Coward. He's in Spain. He's living the life of Riley.
There's got to be some way distinguishing between me and you, Paul.
Yeah, and me, Paul Cunliffe. Okay, so quickly, we're going to run through World Cup. What a crazy few weeks with the World Cup news. Let's go to. We're doing a new thing this week. We're going to do Foster's roster. Okay, because Mr. Foster's been developing a roster of players who could replace playing teams that could replace the Aussies and Kiwis in the World Cup. So where are we up to with the roster?
Hang on, I just retweet it. What's really interesting is there's a definite strand of Aussie Rugby League fan who are red hot internationalists. Like that's how they define themselves. And they've been, you had one Sydney Roosters fan publicly cancel their membership because of what's happened, and they are red hot on the idea of people potentially playing for teams other than Australia. So there's a Twitter account called E Can Play For, which will do pretty much every country in the world. They did Gambia. Even though they only had one player that they took up who could play for them. But, it looks exciting. I mean, the scary thing is it looked to me like England might only be the sixth best team at this World Cup if it happens. But you could have the first ever Rugby League World Cup where genuinely 4 or 5 or 6 teams could win it, maybe even more. Yeah, so I want to see it for that reason, because it's just it could be something that might never happen again, or might not happen for a long, long time. So yeah, all hypothetical at this point, though.
I think we saw it with Aotearoa, didn't we? And was it 2000? Was it when they
played?
Yeah,
2000 they played.
And so it can be done. Whether it will or not, I don't know. I mean, it kind of does it bring into play some players who play in Super League and as well, who perhaps wouldn't have played.
Yeah. No, the
Championship maybe.
Aye.
Some players are out of the Championship maybe who might get a game.
He collects. He does like New South Wales Premiership and Championship and League One and even under 20 under 21s So there's that. I mean, who wouldn't want to see the Turbos in the Serbia team with, who knows, like the local Serbian lads? It could be incredible, and I'd love to see that. I'd be tempted to get out of my southern enclave and head up to watch that wherever it is.
The best player in rugby league playing for Serbia. Could that happen? I mean, could happen. So have we heard any news on whether this is a goer or anything? Anybody heard anything on the grapevine? No. They say they had meetings this week, didn't they? But they just decided they're going to have more meetings, I think. Typical rugby league.
I've heard a bit. I don't want to dominate because obviously just been banging on, but I have heard on, I'm not very connected, but there is sort of positive signs amongst some of the administration of some of the countries who are meant to be coming, who people think are in threat, are under threat of not having their NRL players. But it is massively up in the air. No one's certain, but I certainly wouldn't want my life rested on it happening, but I wouldn't be massively confident if my life was resting on it not happening either. That's just what I'm hearing, though.
Can I just ask? So, firstly, thank you for inviting me on. You might think I'm a journalist, but I'm not really. I mean, I only write about the history of the game. I really don't actually follow too much what's happening today, so I really probably know less than you guys. So I noticed there was a statement from the NRL clubs with all 16 clubs supporting the decision not to send Australia and New Zealand. Does that hint at the fact that they might prevent their players from coming over? I'm guessing maybe not from what Andrew's saying.
I'd say my take on that is, if they were going to stop them, why didn't they say it? Like, I thought it was all, that statement was most interesting for what it didn't say. They didn't go near that, really. And a lot of people then, you know, the sort of Aussie journalists wrote it up saying it strongly implied they wouldn't let them go. I don't know, you know, you could read it that way. I think it's perfectly possible to read it as saying they can't actually stop these guys going.
Right. Well, that's obviously
they want to go.
I mean, this whole thing for me just reminds me of 2001, because if you remember, after the 9/11 attacks, I then flew to Australia the next day to watch the NRL playoffs. So I was out there when it all.
Same.
Oh, right. We might have been on anyone on the plane for obvious reasons. Well, I remember how it unfolded, and this has unfolded in a similar way, with a few big people starting to make a few noises, putting doubt over it, and then all of a sudden, you know, the rug's pulled and it's cancelled. But one of the stories I distinctly remember, 2 or 3 days later, either the Telegraph or the Morning Herald over there spoke to dozens of players who were all sort of fringe players, and they all said, we'd love to play. You know, so if the big guys, Lockyer, Webke, Fittler-Johns don't want to play, we'll play. And I always remember thinking that story was a big part of it eventually being put back on, because there were clearly lots and lots of good players who wanted to play. And I think it sort of shamed the bigger names into, well, Webke accepted into actually playing. So if we do have a situation where an awful lot of guys who have never played representative football before want to play, then it's going to be great. You know, we could potentially have a fantastic competition. But this is the key, isn't it? Are we going to get a lot of guys from the NRL coming over? Or are we going to try and bodge together a World Cup from just Northern Hemisphere-based players? Because I just don't think that's going to be particularly exciting to watch.
No. I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's about player power. There's no one who plays in that NRL, to my knowledge anyway, who is either an Australian or a Kiwi who's come out and said, I want to play. It's only Taumalolo who said he wants to come over, but he's Tonga, and Tonga seem to be all for it, really. I think it just needs one main player, like a Tedesco, like another, to come out and say, I want to play. And I think it might be a bit of a domino effect. And what that might look like, and whether it's kind of like what Tonga did for the President's 13 or a rebel Aussie team coming over, I don't know. But I think you're right in what you're saying there, Andrew, about it was telling what wasn't said on that release than what was. And the players might be a bit strangled because the NRL's all powerful over there, and they're the power makers there. But I think if one player does come out, it might bring a lot of other players to say that they want it.
It was quite interesting. There was a story broke yesterday about Mal Meninga saying he was heartbroken of the decision not to play in the World Cup. And I think when somebody who's as influential and outspoken as that comes out, supposedly, I mean, it's reported that he said it rather than an actual quote that he said it. But if he's in those kind of soundings and he's giving out those kind of vibes, maybe there is a little bit of scope in there for some movement.
Does this cause, you know, I'm going to move on quickly here to Phil Gould's mention of the International Rugby League. Like, does this kind of show up the situation we're in with the International Rugby League at the moment, where we're at a point where the Rugby League World Cup 2021 is kind of like hanging by a thread, and the IRL don't seem to have the ability to just say, well, sod them. We'll just create some more. We're fine. We're going to bring everybody in. We'll bring representative teams from Australia and New Zealand. We'll do all that. You know, nobody said that. You know,
I think what it shows is that the Aussies have never really been that keen on International Rugby League. It's sort of an open goal for them to sidestep it, and I think that's what they're going to want to do. The International Rugby League is toothless. It's just a pointless organisation, and there's no point in them existing. But Phil Gould, I mean, I think I've possibly learned more about rugby league from Phil Gould than anyone else. I'm really one of his biggest fans, and everything he talks about, well, 99% of the stuff he talks about, he knows his stuff, and he really knows his stuff. But when it comes to British Rugby League, you can tell he doesn't watch it. You can tell he doesn't like it. And similarly with International Rugby League, he's got no time for it. I doubt he's ever been bothered about getting the Australia job. He could have got it at some point because he was such a successful state coach. I don't think he's bothered, and I think he's arguing a little bit from a position of ignorance, some of the stuff that he's saying. And he's now sort of addicted to Twitter and getting into arguments with people. Kind of like the idea of him on an international rugby league board because he would shake things up a bit, but I don't think he's got the best interests of the international game at heart. And I think that applies to a lot of people in Australia. And that's what we're battling with.
Yeah, it was Neil Coupland who said that he would be a good addition to the International Rugby League board as well. Yeah. I think the key to me is that he said what he's saying is that he doesn't watch international rugby league, and that's the same for a lot of people in Australia, and perhaps even in this country too. And maybe he's saying, I don't watch it because it's not of any interest to me. Now, how do we make it interesting to him? Yeah, but there's a lot of international rugby league that isn't that interesting. I'm not going to say it's a fantastic product. When it's at the top and it's Australia and England and Tonga and New Zealand, it is fantastic. How do we make it so that people like Phil Gould are sitting up?
But back in 2001, they hadn't lost anything series-wise since 1978 when the French beat them. But now they've lost 4 or 5 finals to New Zealand. They lost a one-off match to Tonga. I mean, then they haven't dominated the last 20 years as much as they had done previously. And there's still, if you go to Australia, you don't ever see anyone in a Kangaroos jersey, do you? They sell Wallabies jerseys at shops all over the place. You never see a Kangaroos jersey on sale. There's no brand there. They're just not bothered. And I'm not sure how we can change that, unfortunately. State of origin is spread over sort of 2 months, and it sucks the life out of the NRL, and they're not even bothered about that. I'm not sure what we can do to change their mentality.
I think you need 2 or 3 consecutive World Cups that they lose. I think that you need Tongans, so say Tonga win 1, Samoa win 1, fingers crossed, England win 1, and just getting. Actually, one thing would be that Tongans and Samoans would be, Tongan and Samoan Twitter would go mad and would rub it in hugely, like social media. It's like when when Pakistan have an amazing result in cricket, then like Bradford and all sorts of different places, there are people driving around and hitting the horns and flying the flags, and social media is awash with celebration. And so I just wonder if that would be, that's what's needed for them to not be able to ignore it, that they're not the top dogs in rugby.
But I think the players and the coaches have got the right attitude. Because I interviewed Tim Sheens for the last issue of League Express, and I asked him how important it was winning back the World Cup, because they'd lost it in 2008, then he was the coach that won it back. And he said it was for 5 years the Kiwis were world champions, and it hurt them. Yeah. But it only hurts the players and the coach. I don't think it hurts the average guy in the street. People like Phil Gould on television, you watch NRL, then they never look ahead to internationals and talk about how exciting the World Cup might be. Not just this year, but all the past ones. They're not bothered.
Do you think the NRL might be too big for rugby league as a whole? And because for years there was in football, there was the argument about the Premier League being too big for England and players not wanting to play for England because they were protecting the club interests and stuff. Do you think that could be a case? Because I still think that the NRL are trying to protect their own interests because it's so strong in Australia. It is Premier League football in Australia, and if the Australian-based players come over here, have a rubbish World Cup, play the COVID card and stuff, go back, it's a massive PR disaster for him.
I'm going to drop something though here for you. I'm afraid that if they send a second or third team and win it, still they'll just be like, well, there you go. Phil Gould will be just like, well, there we go. So, from my point of view, I see the NRL every week, watch most matches, and I just think there's no wonder when you watch Super League compared to NRL most of the time, there's no wonder the Aussies are just like, well, what exists outside of our little bubble? Let's go and have a look. I'll watch Salford versus Lee. And,
when we won something like 6 out of 7 World Club Championships, World Club Challenges. Now, all right, I know they were all hosted in the UK and it was the start of the season, but nevertheless, it still didn't ignite any interest.
Exactly,
there still wasn't any acceptance that Super League might be half decent. And even when guys like Mozza and Gareth Ellis and Sam Burgess, and they've gone over there and they've been megastars, but
Exactly.
they're still not interested in Super League. It still doesn't change anything.
Yeah. So I mean, I want the World Cup to go ahead, even though I'm kind of like posting vociferously about the fact that there's all sorts of problems going on that are outside of the players wanting to play. Players can want to play all they want, but there's loads of administration issues. There's loads of insurance issues. There's loads of problems that people just don't seem to be picking up on. That we've got 85 days to the World Cup, and things have got to be sorted this week, next week, and this is where we're at. I don't think it's good for the game to be in this situation. So, I don't know how we're going to take that forward personally into the next 5 years. This has been a real, for me, this is kind of like the Super League war all over again. When you look back, it's kind of like only the difference is between the NRL and the rest of the world. If you like.
Yeah, that's it. That's nail on the head there, Paul. Like in the end, there's no ultimate authority, and it's two warring factions. And yeah, I just can't get away from the Brexit analogy. It's just people making these decisions and making these statements, and then they're contradicted by the other side, and we don't know who to believe and who to trust, and in the end, it's normal people, whether it's fans and players and what have you, who are going to be hurt by it, and is there going to be any accountability for the administrators? Past experience suggests not.
No, well, come January, they'll all either be back working for the Rugby League or Super League, or they'll be on LinkedIn, getting the next event job. So, their contracts are all up, I guess, at the end of this year. So from there on out, it's up to the RFL or Super League, I guess, to move it forward. So I guess that's a big, it's a big ask, isn't it? So anyway, up to some better news this week.
Yeah.
There was a meeting on Friday, I think it was. Was it Friday? Yeah, it was, wasn't it? The Rugby Football League met up again, and we'd had leaks before the meeting. I think it was the Super League and Rugby Football League met together, and we'd had leaks, and the championships. We'd had leaks of the impending discussion about changes to the game again. And our friend here, Richard, has pulled together many changes over the years. I won't go through them. I'll put them on the screen though, because what I'll do, this obviously gets recorded, and I can put your list on the screen so people watching can see the list. It's superb. And the big thing is that proposal has been tabled to increase the Super League, to 14 teams at the end of 2022. That then gets split out into two divisions of 10. Okay, so when we look back through Richard's list, we've had many different 3 divisions, back to 2 divisions, back to 3 divisions, 5 teams in the playoffs, 6 teams in the playoffs, back to 2 divisions, back to 3. It's just a mishmash of tinkering. And I want to say what Richard posted at the end because it's full of expletives, but he's right. We keep messing with the game. So first of all, I want to ask Mike, right? When he's looking at these kind of things, and he's obviously following the championship clubs like Andrew does, and I think we all do. We all follow the championship. Right. I do more now since I've been doing this again. Mike's been looking after me and diverting my eyes in the right way to see the right clubs. What do you think about all this from a championship point of view? When they say we're going to cut the league down to 10, and it looks like 4 teams are going to get relegated, and maybe once you're up or next year, you might not have another chance.
He's just got to be sorted one way or the other. He's just tinkering. He's just tinkering for the sake of tinkering. There's not going to be a perfect solution to this, but I think we get onto a good thing. Like myself and Andrew were talking about the middle eights on my podcast, plug, and how good they were for championship clubs and moving between the leagues and stuff, and that had some merit. Yeah, the £1 million game, teams will cry, woe is me, and careers at stake and all that sort of stuff. But it's another event. It brings people in for that sort of drama. At the end of the day, clubs want more money, first of all, and more chance of progression, really. And for the last 20 years or so, we've not really had that chance to progress because we've had licensing, ticking boxes, been graded for having baby changing facilities and being close to certain teams and stuff. It's just been bonkers. It needs to go back to, obviously tempered by the fact that the finance needs to be in order, but it needs to be focused on the quality on the pitch. If you're the best side in the league, you go up. If you're not the best side, you come down. How that works, I don't know, but it needs to be a fair shot for all involved, really.
Martin Sadlis, I don't often agree with Martin, but he did say today that this plan was suicidal. Okay. And I agree 100%. So, Richard, you've got a list together of all the kind of things that have been going and coming forward and backwards over the years. What do you think are you agreeing with that? Is it suicidal, or do you think there's merits in some of the ideas?
No, I firstly, I hate the constant tinkering. So when you look down my list, there were 2 or 3 good things that they introduced, but because the game has always been run by incompetence, well, certainly in this time frame, they were wheeled out badly. And so if you roll something out badly, I mean, licensing could have been a great thing. I wasn't necessarily a massive fan of it. I was very much on the fence with that, but they rolled it out spectacularly badly by just making the wrong choices. And of course, Super League and Summer Rugby was a wonderful opportunity for the game, but it was constantly undermined by Maurice Lindsay making cock-up after cock-up after cock-up, so many PR disasters. And even though Lewis and Lindsay got things right, we've then had Wood and Rimmer who basically just seem to get nothing right and just make, errors and errors. So we're in a situation now where, because the game is so weak, the next guy comes along and think, well, I'm going to change this and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And with every change now, it just weakens the game a little bit more, because if you keep upsetting your existing fan base, you're going to lose more fans than you gain. With every change, you need to be bringing in more fans than you lose. But when we kick out these 4 teams, and I've also seen a rumour that they might kick out the bottom 4 from the 3rd division or the 3rd tier. I mean, that's exactly what Maurice Lindsay did in 1993, isn't it? He just 2/3 way through the season, that 3 teams are going to get kicked out for good. History just repeats itself in rugby league. And the main area where I agree with, you mentioned Martin Sadler, we've discussed this before. You need more teams, not fewer teams. If we end up with 10 teams, and one of them is Catalans, and I'm a big fan of Catalans, but you'll only have 9 English teams. That means there's going to be far fewer English players playing top flight rugby league than ever before. I mean, if you compare it to the era where we used to beat the Aussies, we had 30 teams. They were all English. We're now going to have 9. I mean, the player pool is just being decimated. I don't think there's any merit in it whatsoever. The changes that were made when Robert Elston came in, back to the top 5 players and that sort of thing, they were sort of reasonably positive. I thought, well, I can live with these. And here we are, a couple of years on, and they're being scrapped again. It's just, it's just a nightmare. I don't really have the words for it. I just can't believe it. And like I said before, my love of rugby league has gradually diminished over the years. And it's this sort of nonsense, the endless rule changes, the endless gimmickry, and the big structural changes every 2 or 3 years that do it. It just puts people off. It's a massive turn off for fans. And I don't see any positives in this whatsoever. No. I mean, I only follow a couple of sports, really, but do other sports do this as much as we do? Do they tinker and mess around with everything as much as we do? I don't think they do.
Don't think so.
No, and I mean, in football they brought in VAR, which was the biggest thing they'd brought in 3 decades. And that's about it. There wasn't much else, was there? No. More substitutes is probably the only other thing they brought in.
They barely ever changed the rules, back pass rule, and that's about it. Whereas we have about 3, 4, 5 rule changes a year, and you probably had 100 rule changes in the summer era if you had them all together. And it's just mad.
Jimmy Hill did 3 points for a win. What, 50 years ago?
I think I was early. Yeah.
Yeah, that was something else you didn't put on your list, was it? Changes in the points. I think it might have been before 73, wasn't it? Just before 73 we talk about, and there's a lot of discussion about when you reduce the amount of teams, you have to loop pick fixtures because all the clubs still want that. All the clubs still want those home fixtures. So reducing the teams doesn't reduce the fixtures. And that. So a lot of people say, "Oh, we need to have fewer fixtures to have a better international squad," but that never happens because the clubs will always want the revenue from the home games. Is that not?
Yeah, I'm on board with fewer fixtures. In the first Super League season, first two, we only had 22. And then they got greedy by 98, 99, and it was suddenly up to 30. And we had midweek games and these loop fixtures. I mean, people, especially the mid-table teams, lower teams, I think fans just lose interest towards the end of the season. And I reckon some of the smaller clubs would actually be losing money on match days. By just having to open up for just a couple of thousand fans. Loop fixtures are such a bad thing. But what can you do?
We've all seen the leaks. We've all seen what the suggestions are that a future structure might be. I question what the motive is for these leaks to occur. Is it somebody thinks the fans need to know? Are they leaking it to see what the immediate reaction is in the same way that governments leak new policies to see what the reaction is? And the other thing is we've seen the leaks and we've seen what they're planning to do, but we've not really seen a rationale behind why they're looking at these changes, why they're looking. Is it player welfare? Is it to try and increase the revenue? Is it to try and distribute the revenue more evenly? Is it to make us more competitive as an international team? I don't know what the end game is. I don't know what the objectives are.
We don't get any information, do we? All we got, you saw the press release. It was 7-8 lines long, and it resulted in we're going to have more meetings.
Yeah,
Yeah. There's no beef on any of the bones that you see from this. Either they're not interested in what we think, or they actually don't know any more than they're giving out. Whose plans are these? Why do they think the fans will be interested in them?
Yeah. One thing I want to get in, Paul, is that today, to the clubs who would be under threat if they did cut off the bottom of League One, London Strollers and Coventry Bears played out an absolute nail-biter, 14-12. And those are two clubs with massive potential. London Strollers, what Jermaine Coleman's doing down there is incredible. And it's strong links with Jamaica for obvious reasons, with him being the coach there too. Coventry, I mean, the potential is there to have a whole pool of players from populations that we haven't drawn from in significant numbers before. And
they've both had good results recently, haven't they? Sorry to interrupt, Andy.
Yeah.
2 or 3 weeks ago, didn't they beat the teams in third and fourth?
Yeah. I mean, like they are. Yeah, I think that they should be at the heart of any development plan for rugby league, and it's really sad that it seems they're just being, they are not. I don't know enough about. I think it's interesting that sort of Nottingham City. Who else was it? Surely, like Ifield,
Blackpool.
Yeah, that got cut. Then I don't want to disparage those clubs because I don't know enough about it to say. I don't think London Strollers or Coventry are comparable to those clubs. And however wrong it was to cut those clubs in the 90s, it's absolutely tragic to be even thinking about cutting Coventry and London Strollers adrift. It just makes no sense.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Totally agree.
We don't have enough clubs in the first place. So why are we even considering, reducing them even more on purpose?
Clubs like that are treated as an afterthought, though. It's just a top-down focus. It's just Super League clubs who are there. It's an I'm all right Jack mentality. If we're all right, then the rest of them don't necessarily matter. And if they do go through with this sort of thing, there's going to be more clubs that go out of business, because you're right when saying, Rich, you're saying in Super League there's no point to games. Speaking of an Halifax fan, we had 15 years where we were basically playing 15, 20 friendlies a season because we couldn't progress. It's hard to attract fans and sponsors if you've got no realistic chance of moving up the table, really. And I'm sure London Strollers and Coventry especially have grand ideas in the next 5-10 years of moving up the league and progressing. But if the proposals that are being talked about just focus on the 10, 12, 14 Super League, potential Super League teams, then that's where we're going to go massively wrong.
Yeah, they said Super League will split. I'm very concerned about the wording, to be honest. They said Super League will become 2 divisions of 10 because that to me makes me think that they're suggesting that they're going to be 10 professional teams in 2 divisions. So that's 20 professional teams. Right at the moment, we're struggling to get 10, 12 professional teams. And
but this
does that include Toronto and Ottawa and all these Toulouse or anything? We just don't know. Sorry, Richard, go on.
I was just going to say, the name Super League 2 has been mooted for quite a few years. It's not a new idea, and presumably it was rejected a few years ago. As I also tweeted, that would be the 6th new name for the second tier since 1995.
Yeah.
I mean, why do you keep renaming a division? That's a new name every 4 years on average. It's just balmy. I mean, it's going to try and kid people that it's Super League. I mean, who are they kidding? It's still going to be essentially a part-time competition.
Yeah.
The Challenge Cup winners aren't going to come from the Super League 2, are they?
They do. I'll tell you why they do it, Rich. They do it because it doesn't cost much effort. It doesn't cost much money, and it's something like that. And so they can be seen to be doing something. And what would actually work is difficult and takes time and expertise that the people in charge, broadly speaking, don't have and aren't willing to work with the people. We've seen this again and again, that there's people who have offered their time, even for free, just because they're mad keen rugby league fans, and they're people of serious achievement in other fields, but related. And they get told to do one because in the end, there's a cabal of people who would rather be sort of king of the ashes than actually a bit part player in making something good happen. That's how it comes across to me.
Yeah, I agree with all that, but it's a gimmick. It's a gimmicky name, and it's not going to make any difference. It's not going to make more people turn up and watch Featherstone Rovers, for example, or whoever else. And the teams that get relegated into it will be devastated they've been relegated into it. There'll be no consolation because they're still in the competition. It's pointless.
There were 2 lines in the press release that the RFL, Super League, cabal, whatever the overreaching organisation is. They put 2 lines out, and it was the whole game approach. The next 2 years are absolutely vital for the sport. Now, to me, I kind of like think to myself, I've worked for FTSE companies, FTSE 100 companies my whole life. Okay, we don't look 2 years ahead; we look 10 years ahead. You can't. Yeah. I don't think you can run any company looking 2 years ahead. So this is Ken Davey anyway. 2 years ahead. The next 2 years are absolutely vital for the sport. Well, the last 22 years have been vital for the sport. Welcome to the world. We need to make rugby league an attractive sport to supporters. Well, the game is attractive, but we just struggle. Can't do anything else around the game. It seems to we just keep falling over. And then his final little cheap shot, or whatever you want to call it, was ultimately the sport is about the players on the pitch. And I was just like, the players on the, we just spent a whole year and a half with no players in stadiums, okay? And everybody saying it's not the same without the supporters. It's not the same without, people going to the game on match day. It's more than just the players on the pitch. It's a community. It's a social event for people. It's everything. And
also, how many clubs have lost money because of having no fans in the stadium? In Super League especially. How many clubs have lost money because they've got no fans in the stadium either?
A hunch I've had for a time, Paul, is that 2 teams who, in different ways, are struggling on the crowd front, which is Wigan and Huddersfield. I wonder if part of that is down to lack of care about fan experience. So Saints and Warrington made sure that they had terraced ground, their grounds where you still enjoy the game. We know that no disrespect to Huddersfield or Wigan fans at all. I think some of them have said similar. You've got that just sort of county cricket on a Thursday afternoon sort of feel at both those grounds, unless they're somewhere near packed to the rafters. And it's a vicious circle. Huddersfield can have a good team on the field. The players on the field are great, and they have been at times. But the fan experience is rattling around in a stadium built for 25, 26,000. So it becomes hard to build, from 5 to 6 to 7 and retain those fans. So maybe the people in charge need to be thinking harder about what they're actually selling and what the experience of fans is going to be when they're in the ground.
Which makes it a crying shame that the Super League fans and clubs never got the Toronto experience, because Toronto absolutely nailed the fan experience. Going over there, it is one. I've not been lucky enough to go to cup final after cup final and grand final after grand final and stuff, but it is one of my greatest experiences of watching rugby league going over to Toronto there, because it was as if it just got flipped on his head. It was come to the ground, and the rugby league was kind of like an afterthought. There was so much going on, and because they went there and had a good time, they will go back, and then obviously they'll get to learn the rules and stuff. And it is an absolute tragedy what's happened in Toronto. But there are clubs, including Halifax, who are doing a big thing tomorrow, building the fan experience, who are realising what you've just said, Andrew, that you can't attract fans. We know rugby league's a fantastic game, even though it's been messed around with so much, but the actual product itself is brilliant. But we can't just rely on that alone to do it. If you're doing that, you'd see 1,000 people go and watch Siddle on a Saturday, or Wigan St Pat's or whatever, because there's nothing else going on there.
Yeah. The game produces no talking points as well, or very few on a similar thing. It's always been the case. We've always sort of just used the product itself, whereas you see all the other major sports, there's always major talking points, and the media is very different and focuses on things that actually sort of sell the game in a way. We're miles behind, aren't we? Basically, I mean, we could sit here and pull out 50 reasons between us at least why rugby league. I mean, at the end of the day, not enough money, not enough fans, not a big enough playing pool, and no matter what structure you come up with, you can't solve those problems.
It's really sad that Peter Deakin, it's very sad he's not with us first and foremost, but it's now 25 years ago that he introduced those ideas, and we almost need him again. Like, I'm just thinking, when Aggie was on about Toronto, I was lucky enough to go to a Miami Dolphins match. And Miami Dolphins, I don't know much about NFL, but I think it's agreed Miami Dolphins have been awful for ages. It's not a problem. Like, they still, the event, even though everyone going seemed resigned to the fact that Miami Dolphins weren't going to be any good, that was only part of the reason they were there. And so we know, it's proven how you get a sports league to be successful. And I just don't understand why Peter Deakin was able to take on those lessons, and they seem to have been forgotten. We seem to have...
I was thinking of him just before. I genuinely was, because I was sort of a full-time journalist for about 4 or 5 years, and I used to hear stories about how great he was, and nothing, absolutely nothing. No one took the mantle on from him, really, at any of the clubs. You have even the struggling Super League clubs would almost sort of want to prevent someone like myself from talking to one of their players. If you owned a restaurant in town and the local paper wanted to do a feature on you, you'd be chuffed to bits. You wouldn't turn it down, would you? But rugby league clubs do.
Yeah.
Coaches start meddling in media stuff and refusing to let their players. And one of the many reasons why I just got fed up with it and didn't sort of renew my press pass about, 8-10 years ago, was that it was just getting harder and harder and harder to speak to players. And all you're doing ultimately is offering these clubs free publicity.
Yeah.
And absolutely unbelievable. What Peter Deakin used to feed stuff to League Express. Some of the stories I've heard are great. He just knew how to do it.
Yeah.
You'll remember the 97 Cup final, Andrew, at Wembley.
I do remember.
Bradford lost the second time.
Yeah.
That was good.
Sorry, Andrew. But you will remember that 6 days later, the clubs faced each other again at Odsal.
Yes.
And he got on the phone to League Express after that game, and he was like, put on the front page that there's the rematch next Saturday. Don't just go with the fact that Saints have won the cup again. Get the rematch on the front page. And he was... I was the editor of Rugby League World for 3 years. Not one club ever said to me, can we be on the front cover? We'll get you some good photos. We'll get, players in our news. We'll get our start. Because no one thinks along those lines. No. One of the many reasons why I sort of started to fall out of love with the sport was when you are a journalist, you see firsthand how bad everything is, how unprofessional everything is. And, you know, as I said, we could come up with 50 other reasons between us. This is a major one. There's just nothing for you out there. You know, there's clubs just don't know how to use the media, don't know how to play the game, don't know how to whip up interest. Just sort of partway through writing a book on Leeds Rhinos, and just a little thing, but I came across a game between Leeds and Bradford in '97 when Hetherington and Casely started having pot shots at each other. Clearly it was staged, but it worked, and they got like 20-odd thousand to a midweek match at Headingley between the two teams. I thought, why doesn't that happen now? But that was like a one-off, so no one's done that since. It's not hard. But we, as you said, as Mike said, we rely on the game itself to sell, and there's not enough. You need more than that.
Yeah.
In football, it's the managers, or there's always something else happening with the game, or there's big name ex-players in the media who make the stories by having a strong opinion, and our guys all like sort of sitting on the fence, and we don't want to offend anyone. You know, there's so many things that other sports do that we're nowhere near doing, and they wouldn't be that difficult to pull off, a lot of them.
I thought we were on to a win at the start of the season when Hardacre and Jake Connor were going at each other, and I thought, right, this is really refreshing. Yeah. Let's carry this on, but it's just stopped since then.
There's a rugby mentality, isn't there, that when someone does that, we love to see them fail, because Richard Branson did it in '98 by saying you northern softies or something like that. Yeah. And everyone took great delight in the fact that London weren't particularly good in '98 and Mark Carroll and those guys didn't fare so well. But that's what he was trying to do, and that was, he knows what he's doing. Yeah. But you're right, that Zach Hardacre thing, that was really good, but players aren't.
So there's a prime example here with the World Cup, right? You know, it was trundling along, and most people outside of the rugby league world didn't really know much about it. And then the Australians and the New Zealanders pulled out, and it was suddenly on BBC TV, and it was on Sky, and it was on everything. And, you know, there's a prime example. Richard, you just nailed it. Everything about what you and Andrew just said about Peter Deakin and about how they would manufacture stories like that. And even to a lesser extent, maybe, you know, Casely and Hetherington and people like that would do too, to a kind of, but only for the Leeds Bradford airport derby. And so you know, there's a prime example of how you can get publicity, but you've got to be a bit more creative than just, you know, it's Wigan versus Saints this week, and you know, it's going to be a great game. Well, that's just not good enough, you know. You know, and you know, you've got to feed the. I had this discussion many times over the years with meetings with the RFL in the early 2000s of trying to get them to feed the newspapers videos, publicity shots, information about what best, you know, player matchups and why they would eat each other for breakfast and rip their heads off and things like that. You know, all the words that we use on the terraces are the kind of things you need to kind of push outside of the sport to get people interested. And it was all lost. I just, you know, I now kind of went like you've done, Richard, where I took 10 years out essentially of all of that, and I've never really been that bothered about getting involved again until very recently, when I feel that the press in the UK, as much as the game and everything, especially in the rugby league press, just aren't pushing the buttons on where these problems lie. You know, there's obviously a big problem in the game, within the administration. And it just keeps getting passed up. We're not going to get deep in. And, you know, we've not been able to get press pass for a long time, you know, rlfans.com. You know, we're not since 2000. So we just get denied all the time. So every time we've tried in the past. So, you know, if the world's most popular rugby league site can't get any kind of press out of the RFL,
that's ridiculous.
You know,
I didn't realise that.
So you know, we do have a good working relationship with them, though, with regards to promoting matches and games and things like that, which is good. You know, we're happy to do that as much as possible. But I do find it a real chore to kind of get much out of them. I wouldn't even know.
Have you done anything to upset them, or is it just a case of we're not interested in accrediting websites?
No, they said, yeah.
They don't like new media. I had a long discussion with the RFL at the start of this season, because obviously we would have liked to have more extensively covered championship games, particularly with them being broadcast on league. And we tried to get ourselves access to it, and it was just point blank refused. We don't deal with new media. I put a strong argument back to them that they ought to reconsider dealing with new media, or or looking at new media as a way of promoting, ourselves included in that, but there was just no interest at all.
So this was, you wanted access to championship games, essentially?
Well, so we could cover championship as well as we cover Super League. I mean, we can cover Super League off Sky. We wanted to have access across the board to the I-League coverage. And we were basically told, well, you can access it as the same way supporters do. And I think it was going to work out at about £180 a month for us to buy all the matches. So at which point we decided to focus on Super League for the season.
Right.
Bonkers.
Yeah,
We really do shoot ourselves in the foot, don't we?
There's not many websites that do lives. We do live scores across all of our games. Okay, we do Championship, we do League One, we do Women's Game, we do like the live as they're being played. We do all of these sports and Super League, of course, and the NRL. We do all of those. We do them every single week, every single game. There aren't many websites or media outlets that would do that for rugby league. Okay, and we even have rebroadcast, helped sportsmen do broadcast. We've helped the women's game with Twitch broadcast, doing all that, and yet we still can't get access. So we can't keep banging our heads against this brick wall ourselves, and that's frustrating. We a couple of weeks ago there was a signing for Warrington, and that day we had 9,000 people on at one point on the website, trying to find out more information about what the contracts were, and we're continually going up. There was obviously a lull a few years ago, but we're continually increasing now, and we just can't get through the door to do more coverage, and we want to do more, but so
I set up a magazine in 2005 and I was treated like dirt. It wasn't new media, but I was new.
Was that 13 magazine?
Yeah.
I mean, we promoted that. We were like,
I got a lot of sales. I remember you put a link up, and I think I got a lot of sales for that. So very belated thank you for that, Paul.
No, but I mean,
the RFL is like, who are you? We're not, go away. Unbelievable.
I don't understand it at all. It doesn't make any sense to me.
I never really felt that. I mean, I've only worked since then for Rugby League World and League Express, but I've just always felt that they never liked me or never liked the organisations I worked for, and just weren't interested. And I just, no, I've always had a bad relationship with them. Always.
I think the problem is they treat media as the enemy rather than the friend, and that relationship is never going to be a productive one.
I wrote when the Magic Weekend first came along in 2007. I basically wrote a shortish article as part of an editorial saying that I wasn't really a fan, and I thought it was a mistake. And if we have I still sort of think that, but maybe now's not the time, and I'd probably need 5 minutes to explain my argument. But wow, I think I went on the naughty step then. I don't think I came off it for a long time, and it was like, wouldn't do me any favours. Nothing after that, I remember one example. The New England kit was launched midway through 2008, and that was a World Cup year. So I rang them up and I said, can we have a prominent England player in the new kit, and we'll put it on the front of Rugby League World? And they were like, no. I was like,
what's going on?
A magazine that's at eye level in shops all up and down the UK, every WH Smith. Yeah. That would have been great. And they're thinking I was asking them for a favour. I was offering to do them.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the key. That's the key.
I was the naughty boy that wasn't on board with the Magic Weekend, and that and that's just how it works. And it's
how dare you have an opinion? How dare you?
I know. That's just how it works.
I mean, our fans have got 120,000 unique visitors every month. That means there's 120,000 different people come to our website every month and are interested in rugby league. Now, why do we get pushed back all the time with that? Who else gets pushed back? If the Love Rugby League, do they get pushed back as well? You've just mentioned a few times you've been pushed back. Who else is getting pushed back? Is everybody getting pushed back a little bit? Are they kind of trying to, keep a distance? Don't let them find out too much about us, kind of thing. So I think to me that's a big problem with the game, is we just can't get anywhere with them to get anything out of them or help them to promote themselves.
Yeah. We moan about the lack of exposure, but when you've got people like yourselves wanting to give them exposure, they're not accepting it. It's just awful. It's such a backwards thing. It just feeds into the national stereotype of it's just a dumb northern game is rugby league. they don't like new media because they've still got horse and carts or whatever. It's just baffling. Absolutely baffling.
I've always thought that. It crystallised for me. I don't know. You might be a bit young, Aggie, for keeping up appearances.
I remember. Hyacinth Bucket, yep.
That's why I think the RFL have got Hyacinth Bouquet syndrome, and they see their fans as a bunch of Onslows in their vest and what have you.
Yes.
But the thing, the thing about that show was a lot cleverer than people give credit for. Onslow was the clever one. He was far smarter than Hyacinth, and I think there's a weird snobbishness amongst some people at the RFL and just in rugby league administration about the fans. They think they know what rugby league fans are like. They think of us as a sort of mass of people queuing to get into KFC at Leicester Forest services on a Wembley day. And the reality is, well, yeah, even if there is someone queuing to get into KFC, they don't know anything about their background. They don't know anything about what they know and what they do. And there's plenty of people who are a lot smarter than they give credit for. So it's rise of the Onslows, guys. We're the Onslows, and we're going to hopefully push back against these Hyacinth Bouquets who've been holding us down for too long.
There you go, Paul. RL fans branded string vests.
Well, on that amazing analogy, I think this has been a wonderful show. I really enjoyed talking to you guys. You got so much knowledge about everything that's going on. I know, Richard, you said to me earlier that you've not really done much work, you've not been involved much or taken much notice of rugby league for the last 10 years. But to be honest, mate, you've got a great brain for the game, and everything you say is superb. So I fully agree with everything everybody said tonight. It's been wonderful. Thanks. Yeah. Thank you very much for coming on, everybody. And let's hope we can do it again sometime, at different times. Thanks very much. And that's Rugby League Radio for another week.